All right, recording in progress. Welcome everybody again to another Around the Sailing World. You guys have all shifted locations. I'm at a new location. I guess except for you, Ed, you're sort of back in your place, having survived a bit of a European road show, right? Yeah. So can't wait to hear how that all went down. And nice. I think we were out poking around the bay the other day, and I could swear I saw a boat with a ton of sails up, and that must have been you guys, no? On the Spartan.
Yeah, cloud of sails going upwind with at least 4 sails up. That's the minimum.
Mm-hmm. So can you run me through what I was trying to explain to my wife? It's too old school technology for me. What's the name of all the sails, top to bottom?
Well, starting from front to back, if you're going double head rig, which is the easy way to tack, you have a jib top, which is on the forward forestay, and that hoists way high up with a really long tack pennant. And then you have a staysail, which tacks to the bow and goes to the hounds. That's just like a jib. And then back aft on the mast, you've got the big old gaff rig mainsail. And then above that, when it's under about 15, you have the jackyard, which has 2 very dangerous booms that get hoisted up totally free flying, shaking around like crazy. And eventually they get set in place, and it's like turns your gaff rigger into something like a Marconi rigger.
And who makes the call on what inventory goes up?
We have a sail chart. We just follow the sail chart, you know.
Well, the boat looked nice, and there was plenty of activity on the bay, and then so you guys made it pretty productive, I guess, on 2 good days of a southerly.
Yeah, we had mast problems last year, and we cracked our mast, and so they had respliced a piece in it, and so we were a little bit gun shy at first, but we started pulling harder and harder, and by the end, we even let Cam Lewis came in for a guest appearance, and he was talking into new systems that were even harder on the rig, and everybody was happy with it. So it was good, and hopefully we wrap it up with one more in a couple weeks, and then hopefully get on a ship and go to Europe, and where the boat will do the classic circuit over there for a few years.
Amazing. So you got, was that right? You got Cam Lewis to come out of retirement to come sail this weekend?
It's true. He flew down on his float plane from Maine and spent 2 days terrorizing the Spartan crew. And they didn't know what hit him when Cam got on board, but by the end of it, he has so many good ideas. It's great to have good sailors come on board like a complicated boat like that, built in 1913 with all these ropes and strings and everything, and not many winches. And Cam had a bunch of really creative ideas.
To be determined, yeah. As well as some stories, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, and lots of selfies. If you want me to share, I've got a sailing under the bridge with a gaff rig, and there's Cam in the foreground. He's good at PR.
Yeah. All right, and so you before we start the call, you started telling us about a bit of a road trip. You're now up in Skaneateles. You're going to the lake, but you made a detour on the way. Maybe it's sort of tell the viewers what happened.
Yeah, let's see if I can pull up easily a picture of what I did. And I was driving from Newport, Rhode Island, where I was sailing the Spartan, and then I moved on down to Skaneateles Lake, where I am right now. And on the way, I decided to stop and see a family friend and an old mentor of mine. There's the picture that I was looking for, and I will share it for you. And he is a world famous sailor in the Hall of Fame, and then some. The designer of the laser, right there in the lower right. You got Bruce Kirby and his wife, and myself in their backyard in Rowayton, Connecticut. And Bruce is 92 years old and not going strong, but sharp as a tack. And it was really fun to, I think there's their backyard. Go, there he is working on his computer. He's working on a manuscript of a book biography of his life. And it was really cool to sit down and talk to him about memories. And I thought, since I was doing this call today, and Sailing World has been really close to my sailing history since day one, when one of the editors, a guy named Ted Jones, invited me to go down to the junior sailing program and join in as a non-member. So I asked Bruce to tell the story because, of course, he was an editor of Sailing World. In fact, he might have been the managing editor, and he came from a strict, like he was the Montreal Star editor or something. He was a proper journalist up in Canada, but a 14 sailor and a big international sailor. And he got talked into coming down and working on this sailing magazine, which the offices at that point weren't in a room with a spinnaker in them, where you are now, Dave, but it was in Chicago. One Design and Offshore Yachtsman started there. A guy named Freeman Pittman was the publisher, and Bruce came in, and pretty soon thereafter, at Bruce's suggestion, they moved east to 5 Mile River in Rowayton, which was my hometown, and that was propitious because slowly more and more staff came in, and it was interesting to hear the stories of, all the people that I remember. And if you look at the masthead of One Design and Offshore Yachtsman, and then yacht racing, and Sailing World, all the famous names that came through, like Bob Smith and Mark Smith and Ted Jones and et cetera, et cetera. But it was fun to hear the old history again. And Bruce had fond memories. He said he tried to talk at one point, talk about moving the office up to Newport, but that happened a lot later.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. The one picture on your screen, I noticed his typeface, and I mean, he'd always call me every once in a while, "Young Dave, you're making the font too small. I can't read it anymore." And so he always had the big readers, and yeah, it was always great that he'd call every once in a while. And I remember not that long ago, we actually sent Peter Hurley, who was he's an outstanding now laser masters sailor and former, I guess he was a model, but now he's the headshot guru in New York City and Manhattan. Never look him up. He's he's famous. He's a star. But anyway, he's the one that shot the Kirby profile pictures, which came out fantastic. So yeah, I hadn't seen him since then. But he won his lawsuit, which is a nice way to kind of end what was probably a battle that probably took a good 10 years off his life, I'm sure,
Yeah, that was hard for him and his wife Margot, but they got through it. They have a great support there. He's still members of New York and Norotan Yacht Club. There was a Norotan member, Peter Wilson, who was there right as I arrived. So he hasn't sailed, he said, in 2.5 years. The last time he raced the sonar was 3 years ago, and probably not going to happen again. But he did it into his late 80s. He said his results kept going down, but that's okay.
Yeah. Same they have to
Stuart Walker. Familiar for many of us. What other boats did he design?
So in the modern, before the laser, he was known as a designer of the open class, the International 14, and the Kirby Mark 1, 2, 3, 4, 5s. I remember in my generation in the 70s that was the boat to have for a while, before they started having super racks and stuff. And then of course the laser was the biggie, and that's a great story. And he did a smaller one called the Bite, then the sonar, of course, which has been quite successful, and a smaller version, which is a popular club boat in New England called the Ideal 18. I did the Admiral's Cup with him on one of the big boats he designed, which was an IOR 41 footer called Runaway, which was a lot of fun. I got to sail with a sometimes contributor to Sailing World, maybe once in a while, was famous journalist by the name of Bob Fisher was on the crew. Kirby was all part of that, they called them SINS, the Society of International Nautical Scribes. So we always had a great crew. And he, later in his life, he designed a bunch of cruising boats, but he got really into the flat bottom, double ender catches and cruising boats that sort of, I think, have a heritage on the Sound and maybe the Chesapeake Bay. And those were the last few that he did. I remember at one point he did a rowing boat that 2 guys, I think, rowed across the Atlantic trying to set the record. So he's designed dozens, if not hundreds, of boats.
One that we know of. And also, like you mentioned, Nat Philbrick's, I guess, sort of what will probably be Nat's final boat out there in Nantucket as well.
Yeah, that was Bruce said that was the last boat he designed, and it was cool to see Nat contributed the forward to the book that he's working on now, that Bruce is working on. So I said, Bruce, you got to finish that. So don't leave us before that's done. But it looks like it's pretty far along.
Yeah. How far along is he really, or what's your sense of, is he ready to finish it or?
He said he has to work on 2 or 3 more chapters, but I think, you know, being the journalist that he is, I mean, he's already sent the manuscript to other famous journalists like,
I mean, probably Ruminator.
People to come in. Guy Gurney, he sent it to Guy Gurney to edit. He says, read the whole thing. Don't change a word though, because I'm a copy editor. Because I guess Bruce started out as a copy editor. So dangerous to be the author and also the editor. It's like, I want you to edit it, but don't change anything.
Yeah. He'd be better off not sending to me then. You can't resist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and this year, guys, this is the. Sorry, Jonathan. This is the 50th anniversary, right, of the laser this year. So, you know, a lot of us spent a good amount of time in that boat.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
Much appreciated.
Ilka 6, Ilka 7. That was that kind of came out of left field, but.
Ed, what was the earliest number laser that you had?
37728.
Okay, I had a 2000 series boat it was a club boat that I bought used. Can't remember the exact number, but it was.
Well, I remember going. I went to an event in Lake Lanier in Atlanta, north of Atlanta, and I came the night before and slept in my van as we always did, you know. And then in the morning I was rigging up, and this guy just happened to pull his boat up right next to mine on his little trailer, and he starts rigging up, and I went away to register or something. And when I came back, his number was 1 digit earlier than mine. His was 37727. And I said, hey, that's pretty cool. We got, we're so close. And he was like, yeah, whatever. He was all intense, ready to get started racing. But as time went by, we got to know each other. And later, 40 years later, he became the district secretary here in Florida. His name is David Hartman. And, just kind of fun. It was, an awful lot of people that you met along the way in that class who did all kinds of things, went on to, greatness in the sport and other areas, or just continued to be very helpful at their local club or whatever it is. And, but there's an awful lot of people that were touched by sailing lasers, pretty cool.
Absolutely. Mobile. Have you sailed a boat and in its full latest setup with the new sails, the carbon top section, all the new controls? Have you had a chance to jump in one, Ed?
I haven't. Well, let me think about this for a second. No, that's right. When the last sails that we got for my kids were the full rig with the carbon mast and the radial sail, and I did sail. I didn't race, but I sailed one afternoon with that for half an hour or something, and big change, very interesting. Way back when, you remember the early in the class there. They tried to recognize that not everybody was the right size for the full size sail. So they came up with what they called the Laser M, which was the modified version of the full rig. And all they did was shorten the top section down and make a smaller sail. Turned out not to work that well because there was no bending of the mast since the bottom section was so rigid. And, it was smaller, but it didn't have a very big range where it went very well. So a few years went past, and a young fellow named Hans Fogg from Toronto got involved with his buddies at Laser, which were, Peter Bjorn and Ian Bruce and those guys. And they came up with what is now the radial. And when they were first doing the radial, which is the opposite setup, it's a shorter bottom section and you keep the same top section. So you get a lot more flexibility of what the range of weight can be in the boat. And they sent, I think it was 4 or 5 different, mast combinations to us down here in St. Petersburg. And myself and 4 or 5 of our local, laser guys, the Funch brothers and Mendelblatts, guys like that, we got all involved in going out on the bay and sailing around in this new rig to see which one of the different mast sections might allow the boat to perform through a bigger range for different size people. And ultimately, that went into the process of becoming the laser radial, which is now there's a lot more people sailing that around the world than there are the full rig. So, and it's a great youth boat, so it's really that change, I think, that those guys came up with, sustained the class's viability for a lot more years, and it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, certainly expanded it beyond a whole nother weight range for sure.
So I remember being in Rowayton, and where Bruce had moved there by then. I was at the epicenter of the beginning of the class, and I attended on shore watching my 2 peers, my best friend BJ Jones and his brother both got a laser, one of the first batch that came down. And Bruce came down with, Bruce had his boat, and I think there were 8 to 11 boats. I do think Ian Bruce came down and sailed. And Bruce Kirby's had laser 1, but it was named 100. And then all the other numbers started 101, 102. So there's no single digit, double digit. It started at 100, the numbering system did. And back then, the original laser, as you may remember, guys may remember, it had a polypropylene traveler. And the sail design, the guys that came up with the rig layout figured that when you go upwind, you want the boom on center line. So you'd ease that polypropylene traveler all the way up so the main sheet blocks would touch, and you wouldn't pull the main very hard because you wouldn't want to bend the mast in light air. And the boom would be on center. And the outhaul, the bang was also polypropylene, just 3-to-1 on the boom, which stayed that way for a while. But pretty soon we figured, I don't think it was figured out then, like people were sailing with their travelers eased. You realize you want the boom all the way at the corner all the time. It's a cat boat, and you don't want stretchy rope, you want unstretchy rope. And the evolution began, and they had a good, the class had a good balance. And then all the cleats were plastic, so all the ropes would burn out, and you'd have your clam cleats would have to be replaced. But that was the beginning. It has to start somewhere. But look at what the class has done. Generations. Look at your kids, Ed. 2 generations there, and I'm sure some families have 3 generations of laser sailors.
Remember how the early boats didn't have ratchet blocks? You had a rotating non-ratchet with a cleat.
Right.
And I don't know at what point, it was a few years after that the people realized you could take that off and put a ratchet block on and forget the cleat.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of subtle changes.
Quite a few, but the whole shape remains uncompromised, and that was the wisdom of Kirby.
Well, and that was the thing, when I sailed the boat back in the 70s and early 80s, and then I didn't sail until, it must have been 2005 or something. And I jumped in my son's boat just to, check everything out and talk to him about how you did a couple things. And I got in there and I was like, wow, this boat it just glides. It's so pleasant to sail. It's right, and it felt like going home. It was really a nice experience. So then I got back into racing him a little bit more. And I think that's why so many people continue to do the Masters stuff. It's a fun little boat.
Yeah. Like the great Seidenberg, still at it, training hard, winning races. It's awesome, Well, cool. Well, I think that I'm not sure, but I think that original hull may be at the Mystic, somewhere in Mystic, right? And I think that may be a side trip for all of us at some point. I've been told that the warehouses of little boats and things that are down there is really fascinating. So maybe we got to plan a road trip at some point, or next time you drive down that way, check on in with them.
Yeah, we got a tour last year during the pandemic. I was doing my ASA Web Wednesday shows, and we got a tour in the back room there, and saw laser number one, and a bunch of super significant small boats just in this covered garage, giant warehouse covered garage, just and great history. I think that episode is at asa.com. I think it's like $15 to watch or something, inside Mystic Seaport. But
Cool.
if you ever get a chance to go to Mystic Seaport and get a tour of the water of that backstage of the small boat exhibit, and you're into small boats like that, it's just it's walk through history.
Cool. All right. Well, switch of topics. Ed, you went off to Europe, race of 44, and so I can't remember where you guys ended up finishing. Give us the race recap if you don't mind.
Yeah, no, we went to Slovenia to a place called Porto Rose, which is just about a 45-minute drive from the Italian city of Trieste. And we had, what do we have, 8 or 9 44s that got together, and they went to tremendous lengths to. In fact, they tried to have this event 2 other times before this, and it kept getting postponed because of all the COVID problems. But this time it went forward. The country was opening up just enough to allow us to come in, and there were all kind of protocols in place. We had to get tested before we went. We had to be isolated in our hotel as a group, the whole event. And then we had to be tested every other day when we were there, wearing masks all the time and doing all that stuff that we've all been familiar with. But then when we get on the boat and we could go sailing, it was like it should be. We were out there racing hard and lots of good stuff going on. The owner of our team was delayed and actually couldn't show up until the second day of racing. So he didn't get any of the training time that the other guys did ahead of time, and hadn't been in a boat for 18 months. So, we would have liked to have done a little better than we did, but we did improve each of the days that he was on board. So that was good to see. But it was so nice to be back with all of the guys that are racing hard, and that all these teams that we've missed. I mean, for 18 months, we haven't seen each other. None of us have. And, it was really special to get back in there and get at it again.
What was the hardest? Yeah, what was the hardest part about getting back into it?
Well, there's the obvious rust for everybody, just a little bit, of things that have to be done a certain way, very precisely, and that precision is struggles a little bit when you don't have the time on the water. But it was amazing how close the racing was. I mean, we finished, probably, I think we had, what do we have, 12? Yeah, we had 12 races. And I'll bet you that we finished 9 of those 12 races overlapped with at least one other boat. And some of them, there were 4 boat overlaps going across the finish line together. I mean, the racing was super close, super exciting. Starts were good. The rules were well adhered to. Umpires were there doing their thing. It was great. And, probably the hardest part, honestly, of the whole deal was, they opened this hotel just for our event. All these hotels that we're used to seeing there's 8 or 10 of them along the waterfront, had been closed for the better part of the last year or more. And, some of them are overgrown, and it's just really sad to see how tightly they've been shut down. But this hotel opened just for us, and only the teams and the people involved in the event were allowed to be inside the hotel. But even when we were inside, we had to wear masks and do, all that kind of stuff. And well, while we were there, the government of Slovenia relaxed their requirements on their citizens, and said that they didn't have to wear masks and outside, and they didn't have to wear them in restaurants, and the restaurants could be open a little bit more than they had been. And so we were actually inside this sort of bubble, all masked up and getting tested every day and being very cautious and careful and with hand sanitizer and all this. And we're looking out the window, and there's all these people that are out there enjoying the world outside, and they're kind of looking at us like animals in the cage. But it was well worth it, and you know, fabulous to get back on the water. And this week, going to where you're going, to up in Chicago, to do the nude event and get back on the water there with American teams. So pretty exciting to see it happening.
Well, it's you say that to me. I understand that Chicago is about to, or if not, is under. They basically they're in the free for all now as well. And so and just speaking with the nude organizing team, you know, they've got the parties planned. They've got I think a maximum cap of 500 people, which is just kind of sort of mind blowing. 500 unvaccinated people, I guess, is the rule, and then limitless vaccinated people. So it'll be a tricky, I think, for organizers to try to figure out. You know, again, I think as a guest of the club, they're going to try a waiver type thing that you've either been vaccinated or you're free of COVID symptoms before entering the party. And man, I hope the sailors are cool with the ladies, you know, the gatekeepers, to just kind of play along, but it'll be tricky, hard to police. But I think we're at about 150 entries, which is before. I mean, I guess numbers before in 2019, and some of that includes some of the Dragon Force racing that'll happen on Saturday, which I think is about 15 boats. But so 130 entries is not too bad for you know, coming out of a pandemic year. And I think yeah, the sense that everybody's ready to go, and including the 52s is our kind of the Grand Prix eye candy for the weekend, which I guess both you and Jonathan are playing on. So, but you've got you're pretty much a plug and play kind of fleet there, right?
Yeah, I think we're just basically bringing the 52 group to the event, and with our own marks and a race committee that uses boats and people that we're familiar with. So, you know, I think we're just adding on and being part of the excitement, which is great, you know, and it's nice that we don't have to add any stress to the process of running the event in the first place. But it's also really, you know, a pleasure to be able to know exactly what we're going to get from the people that we work with on a regular basis. So, yeah. But looking forward to it. And I got to say, you know, the whole thing in Slovenia, that's the first event that I really went to, other than just little weekend sort of practice events in Florida. But that's the first international event that I've been to since March of 2020. And yeah, you know, the relief by everyone of being able to get back together and do what we all love doing was really high. And I think you'll find that that's the same. People are going to appreciate this in Chicago, that we can get out there and do this again. And I'm sure they'll be tolerant of the restrictions that are required.
More drinking on the boat, I say, you know, whatever. It's like old school, you know? That was always what was always cool about Chicago Yacht Club, was, you know, just the raft ups and all the fun that happened, you know, on the dock, you know, before they open the gates to the free run part, which is pretty insane, you know.
They're big on flags too. Everybody loves to have the flags up the rigs up there, right?
Oh yeah, it's Flag Central. Yeah. And so, Jonathan, you're on the Natalie J. Ed, you're on WinQuest. Are you guys considered rivals for the top spot, or what's the lay of the fleet there? Who's the team to watch?
Yeah, I would say WinQuest is probably the winner from last season. You know, traditionally the most polished team, I would say. But the competition will be pretty good this year. Hopefully from us, but also there's 3 or 4 very competitive boats in addition. So I think it's going to be really hard fought.
And what kind of sailing has the fleet done so far this season? Is this the first kind of gathering since last year?
Yeah.
Huh?
First event for the Great Lakes 52 since September.
All right. So we're looking at we did take a look at the forecast that we're talking about, that it's going to be on the light, the sub 10, maybe sub 5 range. It's not good. I mean, what? So on the 52s, how do you guys deal with you know, sitting around waiting and postponements, things like that? How do you make good use of this time with all this talent on board? What would be some tips for the rank and file?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because as Peter Eisler knows, you know, when you go and do TV commentary, there's these dead zones that are always invariably happening when the wind is light. And when I was helping out with the America's Cup coverage back in 2003 down in New Zealand, the guys that were in the studio, you know, were talking away, and then they threw out to Peter Montgomery and I on the water, and And they specifically picked on me and said, as they were showing a picture of guys sitting in the scoops of the back of the transoms of the boat, drifting around, waiting for wind, he said, so Ed, what are the guys talking about out there right now? And of course you're looking at a picture of, like, I don't know, Simon Dobney and anyway, there were several people in the scoop of one of the cut boats. And I just was trying my very best to be politically correct. And I said, well, there's really two things. And one is food, because, there's always, where's the rest of the food? That's what these guys all want to know about. Where's the rest of the food that we have out here? But more primarily, and I said, this was the hard part, to be politically correct. I said, let's just call it relationships.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of discussion about relationships. And I bet that's the best I could come up with at the time. But I mean, you're right. There's an awful lot of downtime in a light event while you're waiting, and you can't just go in. So you're out there telling stories. And that's actually how you really get to know your teammates more than anything else.
Back in the old days when I was a kid on Long Island Sound, there'd be drift-a-thons, and they had this. There was more that goes on then than now. There are these water fights, and then they invented like water balloons. We'd fill up the water balloons and throw them, and then we created these things we called funnelators, that were just like giant slingshots that you could really throw the water balloons a long way. You don't see that as much, do you?
Yeah, we're not supposed to be launching balloons in the water. That kind of killed the funnelators. Yeah, the launchers. Those were good. But I was talking to the new team. I think we need to sponsor one of those, those gigantic floating trampolines to just tie up behind the race committee boat and just encourage, playtime or wakeboarding, anything. But yeah. Apparently the water's cold there.
Yeah, the water's cold. Sounds like you're trying to get Red Bull involved, though. So we'll
something.
See.
Yeah. We'll get Sail GP there. See, they seem to figure out how to make things happen when there's no breeze. So. Anyway, did you watch any of that this weekend? Speaking of,
haven't had a chance to.
Yeah, you heard about the 3 up. Oh. Yeah, they went with 3 crew, looking at the forecast, and at least on the U.S. boat, they had Rome Kirby sort of switching back and forth between cockpits, sort of half grinding, and it was pretty bizarre, the whole thing. But I guess full effort for making the racing happen. But I do have a bone to pick with them, because my first reaction was, I think they had to add some corrector weights to make this thing happen and stuff, but they have all these, females, and they're trying to really push this new initiative, and why not sub in one of your females on the grinding pedestal rather than leaving them on the chase boat? Haven't heard back from them. That was a question, but anyway, missed opportunity, I think, but it was pretty interesting racing to watch 3 people try to get these things around the race course. So the boat handling was not sharp. Pretty sad. Go back and watch the highlight. They'll make the highlights reel look really good. So, all right. Well, I guess we've hit up our time. So we'll I guess Jonathan and Ed, we'll see Chicago, and so you're on vacation now. I see you got boards and guitars, and you're in your Skinny Atlee's summertime checkout. You got the kids coming up too.
Yeah, I got my team gear on, the sailboat shop. I got to go there and see if I have any boxes. No, this is just a quick trip to open up the camp, and I went for a swim this morning, and you definitely aren't going to want to be swimming in Lake Michigan. It's still really cold. But I'll be back to Newport in a couple of weeks for another thing on spin on Spartan, and look forward to some good time here at the lake with the whole family in about a month or so.
Excellent. All right. Well, we'll see you all shortly, and thanks for joining. We'll catch you next week. Close to noon.
See you in Chicago. Thanks, Dave.
All right, we'll do.
Hey, bye. Have fun.
Thanks. See ya.